They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.
What up? Welcome back once again to the Necro Zoo. I am Bones. And in this one, let's go ahead and add one more figure to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now today we will take a look at Knightfall, Nightwing. Now though we have received various versions of Nightwing, this is a throwback more to the 90s Knightfall era of Batman. Now the things that stand out to me right away are the color scheme, a little bit lighter, the very prominent yellow, and the costume design. Now these are starting to pop up around Target, so be out there hunting if you want to pick this guy up. And he still is around that $20 price point. And as I said before, this is more based on the Knightfall look. Don't really expect much from this guy because he is a reuse of the Blue Beetle Booster Gold body book. But it is a little bit fun to expand the line and to get a version of Nightwing based more on that cool 90s look that a lot of the characters had during that era. Now he does look pretty resilient in the packaging, but let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. But first, he does come with your standard black DC Multiverse stab. Now, of course, these are not really needed, but sometimes they do come in useful. He also comes with his Datafall card on the front. You do have some source material from the comics. And of course, we do love the artwork from that, 90s look of these DC characters. Really, actually, a very popular time for artwork and storylines in the DC Comics lore. Now, on the back, you do have some information. It's pretty sweet. We'll add this to the collection. Now, he does come with a little bit of accessories. He does come with two alternate gripping hands. Now, of course, I have switched out the hands because I like to review the figures with two fists, but it's pretty nice to get two alternate versions of hands. Maybe you want them holding some Eskrima sticks, or maybe a Batarang, or a Nightwing orang, however you want to call it. And we really do appreciate the alternate hands from McFarlane. Also has an alternate gesturing open hand, which I really like these hands. These are awesome, especially for figure photography. And then finally, you do have a hand that's actually gripping a sort of Nightwing disc. Now, they didn't make this little disc an accessory. They actually molded it into the hand. I'm not really sure how I feel about this because the little disc would be kind of easy to lose. And the hand does work really well. You can get them in some awesome poses, getting ready to sling that disc. But one thing I really do is appreciate it for the possibilities it gives us with figure photography and posing the character. So really appreciate that. Now I think in this version of Nightwing, the Screama sticks, the batons, are not really that prominent. So I don't miss them here. He doesn't have any storage on his back to hold them. And like I said, this is just an interesting alternate version of Nightwing, but he does look pretty sleek and cool. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. Now we do know that in the comics, when Nightwing gets older and starts getting up there in experience, he, fills out a little bit more, and he no longer has that youthful build. He starts filling out a little bit more, getting a little bit of muscle maturity, and starting to look a little bit more intimidating. Now, first impressions right off the bat, as I said before, for me, this is more like just an added incentive of McFarlane making alternate versions of characters. We do have video game Nightwings. We have the first release that McFarlane did. We have the Teen Titans version. So this is just another alternate version to add to the collection. Now I have to say the reuse of the Blue Beetle body does work with this guy. He's a little bit more of an athletic feel. I do know that the articulation in the first release of Nightwing was a little bit restricted because it was, the first figures from McFarlane. And I do know the range that this body buck has. And I won't go too much into articulation because we've seen it before, but I'll point out some things, move a little bit of stuff around, and let's go ahead and check them out. Now, I do know what they were going for with this look. It looks pretty good. You have a really nice utility belt there, and it fits perfectly aligned with the trunks. Now, this almost goes back to that old school sort of 70s Nightwing. This is like a play off of that. I actually do have that DC Direct figure, but I keep that one in box. I've never opened him up, with like the popped collar, which is a really cool, interesting look for Nightwing. And let's take a closer look at the head sculpt. Now, I have to say, looking at him head on, really one of the better Nightwing head sculpts that we've received from McFarlane. Really captures that comic book feel. Not too much in the shading or any shadows in the face, but the mask is printed on perfectly. The eyes look good. The hair is awesome. Just a really all-around classic Dick Grayson Nightwing head sculpt representing the 90s era. You can even see that peaking of the ponytail in the back that at first we we didn't see in the promo pics. And actually it adds a lot more to this figure. For some reason, once you see that ponytail, it just, picks him up a little bit more than if he just had the standard, cookie cutter haircut. Looking at the head, can look down really well. Looks up even better. Great head articulation. You got right to left. Of course, you could tilt his head for some character. All in all, great range and articulation in the head. Now, you do have the articulation we have seen before. You have the waist, a lot of cool movement. Slight crunch, not a lot, but it is there. But he's nice to twist and put in jumping and fighting poses. Looking at the shoulders, this is one thing I've actually seen, other reviewers point out, and I kind of concur with that. And that is that once again, they didn't paint anything on the shoulder bushing ring. And although it does give you a lot of movement, like you got nice up and down and front to back range, it kind of breaks up the illusion of that costume design because it doesn't continue on into the shoulder bushing. They could have just added that same imprint on the front and on the back. Just a little piece, not the whole bushing, and it would have really added to the figure and give it a little bit more of a premium feel, because this just looks like they skipped over it and got a little bit cheap. One thing for sure, it does look good when you match it up to the shoulder. I mean, that's where it, that's its best look. But as soon as you move it and try and, give it a different position, you right away see that gap between the printing of that design. So not a big fan of that. That is really a negative. And then I think it will be pretty hard to try and match this print. I mean, you got that like off yellow, and then you have some black printing. So, I mean, I could try and do it just, to see if I can, but we'll have to wait off on that. Now, of course, this is just printed on, which is one of the drawbacks that I have with a lot of people like to say, like, I would prefer McFarlane just reuses bodies because they'll all look the same. And even though they have the same body type, at least they all like fit uniformly on my shelf. And I really don't like that because you get into stuff like this. I would really prefer if this was like an added sculpted detail to the costume, because then you get into the arm and it's the same thing. He just has that printed on design. And don't get me wrong, I will enjoy him regardless. I am open to both things, like sculpted design and just printed design. It doesn't really bother me. But I do lean a little bit more to adding that added effect of sculpted design. Now, these wrist joints are really iffy because although they do give the 4 ways of articulation, you got to have them in a specific way so that they look really clean and don't break up the sculpt and give a nice silhouette of the figure. But it looks pretty good. I mean, I kind of knew what I was going to get into by looking at this guy. So although I don't prefer a lot of the things here, it is expected. Let's take a look at the lower body. As I said, you got that really beautiful pouch belt. Works really well with this version of Nightwing. He does have thigh swivel. And this is without even heating him up. So, I mean, that's some nice movement there in the thigh, which means you can move the boot from side to side without breaking up the sculpt. Kick up, respectively. Kick back really well. Don't be afraid, because that is why the trunks are made of soft rubber, because when you put everything back, the trunks go back to their original shape. Now, looking at the lower body, it's the same thing we've seen before with this body book. But there's another negative there, of course, and that is the painted over just the old sculpt work of the original book. So you could see that right away. If you look at it at a good distance, you can't tell. But of course, we know already what it is. It's a pretty easy, cheap, cost-effective way for McFarlane to get around having to actually sculpt out this boot design and just go with the old cut around the top of the boot. Now, somebody did point out to me that the Dead Man boots are actually different because they only have one line. They don't have this sort of like edging that goes around the boot. So if you're going to do this, that would be a better boot to use because you notice the cut a little bit less. But no, McFarlane has to go with this boot that has that pretty thick band going around the top of the boot. Of course, the ankles are the same, pretty nice movement and range. But we have seen it before. Now, he does feel good and light and articulated in hands. He articulates really smoothly, so that's a positive in this figure. You can easily pop out the hands pretty simply and get them into some cool poses. So I think that's going to be one of the benefits of this figure. A little bit more posability, get him on the rooftops, and you can even pop out the fist and get his little disc throwing hand on there, which really adds to the fun you could have with him. So superposable, really nice to have an alternate version of Nightwing. The colors really pop, the yellow and the light blue. I'm just not a big fan of the reuse, but is he going to be on my Knightfall shelf? Of course he is. Pretty nice rendition of Nightwing. And that ponytail is everything. I mean, when you get him in poses, once you see that ponytail, that actually negates a little bit of the negatives that I have with the figure. But really fun to pose. Really cool in hand. Get him in some jumping, acrobatic poses. The socket and bushing joint actually gives you a lot of range to give you some flying positions. So for what he is, he's fine. Pretty nice, unique version of Nightwing to add to the collection. Of course, you have the gripping hands. You could put those in and add, any kind of weapons you want to add to him. Pretty cool. Easy to stand, not a big problem there. I do want to compare him. Let's bring out the Teen Titans Nightwing, which is actually one of the funner ones to pose and has a little bit more flexibility. So let's go ahead and bring him out and stand him next to the Nightwing. Now they are pretty comparable. He might be just a little bit shorter, a little bit leaner, which gives him that teen feel. So this buck worked really well. They're at a pretty comparable scale. Although the Titans version should be like more of a teen version of Dick Grayson. Now, another thing is, this is my custom, and I actually painted the shoulder bushing joints, which, like I said before, really adds to the figure and just makes him feel like, just gives him a little bit more value when he has that contrasting shoulder bushing to where when you move the shoulder, it actually matches with the colors, which I really wish they would have took the time to do with this Knightfall version of Nightwing. And another figure we have to bring up is going to be the Knightfall Batman. Now, at first, I was like a little bit took aback because when I saw it in the camera, I mean, they look about the same height. But when you actually get them in front of each other, the Knightfall Batman is slightly taller than the Knightfall Nightwing, which is okay. But that is why I tell a lot of people, and they do get a little bit irked at me, and that is that Knightfall Batman is a shrimp. I really prefer the height of Hush Batman. And I know, I know that's a big deal, between collectors. You got some people that prefer Hush Batman and some people that prefer Knightfall Batman. I really wish we had them in between of the two to get us the perfect Batman. But we could still see some differences in the future. But for me, this Nightwing would look really awesome next to that Hush Batman because he's a larger Batman and really has a presence next to any of the sidekick characters. So, anyways, guys, really fun figure, fun to articulate, cool design, cool look. I do want to acknowledge that it has its flaws because of the way they went with the printed on design of the costume. But once you see this like shown in the renderings, you kind of know what we're getting into because of what we've seen when McFarlane reuses the body books. It's not going to be a perfect figure, but for what it is in the $20 price range, it is pretty fun to add him to the collection. So anyways, guys, that's it. That's the Knightfall Nightwing from McFarlane. He's hitting stores now if you want to find him. But you know what you got to do. You got to get out there, keep hunting, keep collecting, and keep customizing. And I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Batman.